The millionaire doctor pleaded, "Act as my wife." And his single stipulation left her stunned. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's go back to our main character. Lydia Hayes stands just outside the cardiac wing at St. Alden Medical Center, the fluorescent lights humming softly above her as the smell of antiseptic clings to the air, her worn sneakers planted on a polished floor that never seems to belong to people like her. She has worked 12-hour shifts all week, double-checking charts, fetching blankets, steadying hands that tremble with fear, and tonight she is still here because overtime means groceries, because groceries mean her mother's prescriptions get filled on time, because every choice she makes is measured in dollars and minutes. She tightens her grip on the clipboard as footsteps approach, calm and unhurried. And she knows without looking who it is, because Dr. Julian Mercer moves through the hospital like the building was designed around him. Tall, composed, white coat immaculate, a man whose name is printed on donor plaques and whispered with reverence in hallways. He stops close enough that Lydia can hear the faint rustle of his sleeve and the steady cadence of his breath, and when he speaks it is low, deliberate, meant for her alone. "Pretend to be my wife." The words land softly, and yet they ring louder than any code blue announcement, louder than the monitors behind the doors, louder than the thoughts racing in her head. Lydia turns, certain she misheard, certain this is some strange test, but Julian's eyes hold hers, gray and tired and utterly serious. And he continues without raising his voice, explaining that the hospital board meets in 48 hours, that his estranged family will be present, that his private life has become a public liability, that stability matters more than truth when reputations are on the line. Lydia's mouth opens, then closes, her pulse thudding in her ears as she thinks of rent due in 6 days, of the letter from collections folded in her bag, of the quiet fear that follows her home every night. She starts to shake her head, to step back into the safety of routine, but Julian adds the sentence that changes everything, the one condition delivered like a scalpel's edge wrapped in silk. No feelings, no shared bedroom, no public displays beyond what's necessary. And above all, you never ask about my past. The hallway seems to tilt as Lydia absorbs it, the rules clicking into place like locks on a door she did not plan to enter. She searches his face for a hint of cruelty, for arrogance, for amusement, but finds none, only a man cornered by expectations, offering a transaction instead of a confession. The silence stretches, measured in heartbeats, until Lydia realizes the choice is already pressing against her ribs, heavy and unavoidable, and the world she knows is narrowing to a single question she never imagined answering. Lydia does not answer him right away because her life has trained her to calculate before she speaks, to weigh consequences the way other people weigh emotions, and as she stands there with the clipboard pressed against her chest, she feels the familiar tightening in her stomach that always comes when money and dignity collide. Her apartment is a 4th-floor walk-up above a closed laundromat, 800 square feet if you count the narrow hallway, with a radiator that rattles all winter and a window that faces a brick wall. Rent is due in 6 days, $680, and the envelope in her bag holds less than half of that. Her mother's prescription refill is scheduled for Monday, $93 after insurance, and the voicemail from the billing office still sits unheard on her phone because listening to it will not change the number. This is the quiet pressure that follows her everywhere. Not dramatic, not loud, just constant, like a clock ticking behind her ribs. She looks at Dr. Julian Mercer again and sees not the headlines or the donor dinners, but the fatigue around his eyes, the way his shoulders remain squared even when no one is watching, the kind of posture that comes from holding everything together too long. He explains more, not pleading, not commanding, just laying out facts the way he does before surgery, that the board questions his judgment. Because his personal life appears unstable, that his family has a history of making scenes when cameras are present, that a wife, even a temporary one, would quiet the noise long enough for him to secure funding for a cardiac program that could save hundreds of lives each year. Lydia hears the logic even as it makes her uneasy, because logic has always been what people use to excuse asking too much from those with the least power. She thinks about the rules he listed, how clean they sounded, how carefully drawn the lines were, and realizes that the most dangerous part is not what he forbids, but what he assumes she can leave untouched. Feelings are not switches you turn off. Silence does not erase curiosity. She asks him what happens when it ends, when the board votes and the cameras move on, and his answer is immediate, rehearsed, that there will be a financial arrangement, enough to cover her time, her inconvenience, her risk. He names a number that makes her breath catch, not because it is extravagant by his standards, but because it would change everything by hers, would mean groceries without counting, medicine without fear, sleep without waking at 3 in the morning to do math in the dark. She hates that relief floods her first, hates how quickly survival argues back. Julian watches her closely, not triumphantly, but as if bracing for rejection, and she understands then that he is offering control, not romance, a contract, because contracts do not disappoint the way people do. The hospital intercom announces the hour, and Lydia realizes she has been standing still for too long, suspended between who she is and who she might have to become. She imagines walking away, clocking out, going home to the familiar ache of not enough, and she imagines stepping into a role that could swallow her whole if she is careless. When she finally speaks, her voice is steady but quiet, and she says she needs time to think, because agreeing without thinking would be the one thing she could never forgive herself for. And Julian nods, accepting that boundary with a respect that surprises her, telling her she has until morning. As he walks away, Lydia exhales slowly, knowing that by sunrise the choice will still be there, waiting, sharp and unavoidable, and that whatever she decides will rewrite more than just her bank balance. Lydia does not sleep much that night, and when morning comes it arrives without answers. Only a dull certainty that pretending this decision does not exist will not make it disappear. She rides the bus downtown with her coat pulled tight, counting familiar landmarks, rehearsing reasons to say no and then undoing them one by one, because survival has a way of sharpening clarity. By 9 o'clock she is standing in a quiet conference room adjacent to the administrative offices, a place that smells faintly of coffee and printer toner, where contracts are signed and futures quietly rearranged. Julian is already there, sleeves rolled neatly to his forearms, a slim folder placed between them on the polished table. He does not rush her. He asks if she wants water. He waits. When she nods, it is not consent yet, only permission to hear what agreeing would actually mean. He opens the folder and slides a single page toward her. Plain language, no theatrics, the terms written with clinical precision. The arrangement will last 90 days. Public appearances limited to board meetings, formal dinners, and 2 charity events. No interviews without mutual approval. Separate bedrooms at all times. Physical contact restricted to what is socially expected and nothing more. A monthly stipend deposited on the 1st of each month, with an additional sum held in escrow until the contract ends. No penalties if she chooses to walk away early. Lydia reads every line twice, then a third time, searching for hidden traps, and finds instead something colder, an agreement designed to eliminate unpredictability. She looks up when she reaches the final clause, the one Julian mentioned but did not explain, and asks him to clarify what he means by never asking about his past. His jaw tightens just enough to notice. He tells her there are things that do not improve with sharing, histories that attract the wrong kind of attention, mistakes that have already been paid for and do not need witnesses. He is calm, but there is an edge beneath it, a boundary drawn with intention. Lydia considers this longer than the money, because silence has its own cost, and agreeing to ignorance can feel like surrendering a piece of yourself. She asks if that rule applies to medical history, to safety, to anything that would affect her ability to stand beside him without lying outright. Julian answers carefully, saying that her safety will never be compromised, that legality is non-negotiable, that the line exists to protect them both from distractions. It is the most personal he has been, and the least revealing. Lydia thinks of her mother, of hospital rooms and forms and signatures that once terrified her until she learned that sometimes you sign because not signing is worse. She picks up the pen, then sets it down again, and tells him she needs one more thing, not money, not favors, but clarity. If she agrees, she will not be treated as an accessory. She will not be spoken for. She will be allowed to say no at any time, even in public, even if it complicates his life. Julian listens, really listens, then takes the pen himself and adds a sentence to the bottom of the page, initialing it without hesitation. Consent may be withdrawn at any time without explanation. Lydia feels something settle in her chest, not comfort, but respect, and it matters more than she expected. She signs her name slowly, the ink dark against the paper, aware that this moment is quieter than the movies make it. No swelling music, no dramatic pause, just a choice made in daylight. Julian countersigns, closes the folder, and thanks her, not warmly, not distantly, but with a sincerity that feels earned. When they stand, there is an awkward second where neither knows how to begin pretending, and Lydia realizes that the hardest part will not be playing a wife in public, but learning how to stand beside a man who has built his life on control and just handed some of it to her. Lydia moves into the role the way she has moved into every demanding space in her life, quietly, observantly, learning the rules before she bends them, and within 48 hours her world shifts from bus schedules and break rooms to key cards and elevators that glide without sound. Julian's penthouse sits above the city like a held breath, glass walls opening to a skyline she has only seen from street level, and the first thing she notices is not the view but the silence, thick and controlled, the kind that costs money to maintain. He shows her the guest room that will be hers, neutral and pristine, then hands her a slim phone and a printed schedule, meetings circled, dinners timed to the minute, names highlighted in careful ink. She listens, nodding, asking questions when something is unclear, and Julian answers with the same precision he uses in the operating room, explaining expectations without emotion, assuming competence without condescension. The first fitting happens that afternoon, a stylist measuring and pinning while Lydia stands still, aware of how unfamiliar it feels to be adjusted rather than overlooked, to have someone ask how she wants the fabric to fall, instead of telling her what will do. When she catches her reflection, she barely recognizes the woman looking back, posture straighter, shoulders no longer folded inward, but she reminds herself that clothing is a costume, not a promise. Their first public appearance is a hospital fundraiser held in a hotel ballroom, where chandeliers cast soft light over linen and glass, and Lydia's hand rests lightly on Julian's arm exactly as rehearsed, her smile measured, her breathing slow. People approach them with practiced warmth, congratulating, assessing, watching for cracks, and Lydia answers questions about work and life with careful honesty, never oversharing, never shrinking, while Julian observes her from the corner of his eye, noting how easily she listens, how she deflects without lying, how she makes others feel seen without giving herself away. Later, in the car, the city sliding past the windows, he tells her she did well, and the simple acknowledgement lands heavier than praise because it is earned. Over the next days, routines form, shared breakfasts taken separately, but at the same time, calendars synced, boundaries respected without being restated, and Lydia learns the rhythm of Julian's life, the early mornings, the long surgeries, the way his focus sharpens when stakes rise. She also notices the cracks, the way he pauses before entering certain rooms, the files he keeps locked, the rare moments when exhaustion slips through his control, and she does not ask, honoring the rule, even when curiosity presses close. The second event is a board dinner, more intimate, more dangerous, where a senior member tests her with a pointed comment about ambition and sacrifice, and Lydia answers calmly, speaking about care and commitment in a way that reframes the question without challenging authority, earning a nod that shifts the tone of the table. Julian reaches for her hand under the table afterward, a brief squeeze that is not part of the script, then releases it just as quickly, eyes forward, as if reminding himself of the lines they drew. At night, Lydia returns to her room and calls her mother, listening to familiar worries, grounding herself in a voice that reminds her who she was before all this, who she still is. She is careful not to disappear into the role, to keep pieces of her life intact, because she senses how easy it would be to let the performance swallow her whole. As the days pass, the pretending grows smoother, almost natural, and that is what unsettles her most, because comfort was never part of the agreement, and yet it is beginning to arrive anyway, uninvited, quietly challenging the boundaries they promised would hold. Lydia learns that the third week is when the performance stops feeling like practice and starts being judged, because the charity gala arrives with cameras at the door and donors who remember everything they see. And tonight Julian needs credibility, not charm. The venue is a historic theater renovated into a marble and gold event space, valet lines stretching down the block, the air filled with careful laughter and expectations. Lydia adjusts the bracelet at her wrist, steadying herself the way she does before a difficult shift, reminding herself to breathe slowly and listen closely. Julian offers his arm, formal and familiar now, and together they move into the room, where conversations pause just long enough to register them. The introductions begin, quick assessments masked as compliments, and Lydia answers with measured warmth, speaking about community care and patient access in plain language that lands because it sounds real. Then a man steps forward whom Julian does not introduce, silver-haired, confident, his smile sharpened by curiosity, and Lydia feels the shift before words are spoken. He congratulates Julian loudly, mentions stability and optics, then turns to Lydia with a question that is not a question at all, asking how it feels to marry into influence so quickly, whether ambition was always part of her plan. The circle tightens, ears angling closer, and Lydia recognizes the test, public and deliberate, designed to expose insecurity. She does not look to Julian for rescue. She meets the man's gaze and answers evenly that she did not plan to marry influence, that she planned to show up, do the work, and support someone committed to saving lives, and that ambition without service is noise, but service with ambition can change outcomes. There is a beat of silence, then a ripple of approval, subtle but real, and the man nods once, conceding ground. Julian exhales quietly beside her, a release he does not bother to hide. The evening continues, smoother now, and when Lydia navigates a tense conversation between two donors with competing priorities, redirecting them toward a shared goal without taking sides, Julian watches with something like astonishment, realizing she is not merely filling space, but shaping it. Later, on the balcony overlooking the city, away from the noise, he thanks her again, more personally this time, telling her she handled a situation that has undone experienced executives, and Lydia shrugs, honest, saying people just want to be respected, even when they pretend otherwise. He studies her profile, the city lights reflecting in her eyes, and for a moment forgets the rules they set, the careful distance, the reason this began. He steps back first, re-establishing space, and the restraint matters. On the drive home, they sit in companionable quiet, the success of the night settling between them like a shared secret, and Lydia feels the strange satisfaction of having earned her place without losing herself. When they reach the penthouse, Julian pauses at her door, hands in his pockets, and says the board meeting is tomorrow. That tonight changed things. Lydia nods, suddenly aware that victories come with costs, that visibility invites scrutiny. As she closes the door behind her, she presses her palm to the wood, grounding herself, knowing that the line between pretending and becoming has thinned, and that tomorrow will ask for proof, not promises. Lydia wakes before dawn to the sound of rain tapping against the glass, a soft, steady rhythm that makes the penthouse feel less like a display and more like a place someone actually lives. And when she steps into the kitchen for water, she finds Julian already there, seated at the counter in a sweater instead of his usual armor, staring at nothing. He looks surprised to see her, then relieved, and for a moment neither speaks, the quiet stretching without pressure. She pours a glass, notices the dark circles beneath his eyes, the tension he has not yet folded away, and asks if he slept. He answers honestly that he did not, that tomorrow's board meeting sits heavy, not because of the vote, but because of what it represents, a narrowing of choices he once believed he controlled. Lydia sits across from him, keeping distance, honoring the rules even as the hour invites intimacy, and listens the way she does with patience, without interrupting, without fixing. Julian talks about the weight of expectations, about how success magnifies mistakes instead of erasing them, about how the one condition he set was not cruelty, but self-preservation, a line drawn because the past taught him what closeness can cost. He does not share details, only contours, and Lydia does not ask, respecting the boundary while acknowledging the fear beneath it. She tells him something small in return, about learning to live inside uncertainty, about how caring for someone fragile changes the way you measure strength, and the exchange feels balanced, a bridge built without trespassing. Later that afternoon, as preparations for the board meeting intensify, Lydia returns to the hospital to finish a shift she promised not to abandon, and Julian watches her leave with a mix of admiration and concern, realizing how easily she moves between worlds without losing herself. That evening, after the meeting concludes with cautious approval and congratulatory handshakes, Julian comes home quieter than expected, the victory muted by exhaustion. Lydia brings him tea without comment, setting it down the way she has learned to do for people who need steadiness more than words, and he thanks her, voice low, eyes softening. They sit in the living room with the city glowing beyond the windows, sharing space rather than conversation, and Lydia notices the way his breathing slows, the way tension eases simply because someone else is there. He asks her why she agreed, really agreed, and she answers that sometimes survival looks like risk, that she chose this because it gave her agency instead of waiting to be rescued by chance. Julian absorbs that, nodding, recognizing the strength he once underestimated. When he stands to leave for his room, he hesitates, then says he will revise the schedule, that she does not need to attend the next event if she feels overextended, offering choice instead of assumption. Lydia thanks him and retreats to her room, aware that the dynamic has shifted, that care has replaced control in subtle ways. Lying awake later, she acknowledges the danger not of desire but of trust, the quiet way it grows when rules are respected and kindness goes unclaimed. Somewhere between the rain and the city lights, both understand without saying it that the arrangement has begun to heal something they did not name, and that healing, once started, rarely stays contained. Lydia realizes something is wrong not because of a confrontation but because of silence, the kind that spreads through a room before anyone speaks. And it begins at the hospital when a colleague avoids her eyes and a supervisor asks to speak later, privately, as if discretion itself has weight. By the time she returns to the penthouse that evening, the city feels sharper, the elevator ride longer, and Julian is not there. She waits, phone untouched, mind racing through possibilities she refuses to name, until the door finally opens and he steps inside with a controlled stillness that tells her the storm has already passed. He does not remove his coat right away. He tells her there has been a complication, choosing the word carefully, and explains that someone from the board received documents questioning the authenticity of their marriage, timelines, financial patterns, insinuations framed as concern. Lydia listens, heart steady but heavy, because this was always the risk of visibility, and she asks who is responsible. Julian does not answer directly. He says the board has requested a clarification meeting in the morning, that legal counsel advises minimizing exposure, that discretion now matters more than ever. Lydia hears what he is not saying, the calculation forming behind his eyes, and she asks him plainly whether he intends to deny the arrangement. The pause before his answer is brief but decisive, and when he says it may be necessary to protect the program, the words land with quiet finality. He does not accuse her. He does not raise his voice. He frames it as strategy, as sacrifice, as something unavoidable, but Lydia feels the ground shift beneath her because the line they drew together has been crossed without her consent. She reminds him of the clause he added, the one that promised agency, the right to step away without explanation, and he nods, acknowledging it even as he explains that timing has erased the luxury of choice. In that moment, Lydia understands the true cost of proximity to power, how quickly respect becomes conditional when stakes rise. She tells him she will not lie, not publicly, not privately, not to protect an image that erases her autonomy, and Julian's expression tightens, not in anger but in recognition of a boundary he cannot move. The conversation ends without resolution, suspended in the air between them, and Lydia retreats to her room, packing with deliberate calm, folding clothes that still smell like borrowed luxury, placing the phone he gave her on the desk as if returning evidence. She leaves a note, not dramatic, just clear, stating that she is withdrawing consent effective immediately, that she will attend the meeting if asked but will speak truthfully, that she wishes him well. When she steps out into the night, The city feels louder, closer to the street she knows, and she exhales a breath she did not realize she was holding. The next morning, Lydia walks into the boardroom with her head high, answering questions simply, confirming facts without embellishment, refusing to be shamed for transparency, and when it is over she leaves without waiting to see who benefited most. Julian watches from a distance he created, hands clasped, understanding too late that silence can wound deeper than exposure, that protecting a future at the expense of a person fractures something essential. As Lydia rides the bus back toward her neighborhood, sunlight breaking through clouds, she feels grief but also clarity, knowing she chose herself, knowing that whatever comes next will be built on ground she did not surrender. Lydia expects distance to harden into routine, grief to dull into something manageable, but instead her days fill with work and quiet resolve. And it is there, in the ordinary cadence of caring for others, that she hears the first ripple of change, a message forwarded by a colleague, then another, headlines phrased with careful neutrality, whispers turning into statements. Julian stands before the board again, this time without counsel shaping every sentence, and he speaks plainly about the arrangement, about consent and transparency, about why he chose truth over convenience when it mattered most, even when it cost him leverage. He releases documents himself, preempting speculation, and reframes the narrative from scandal to accountability, from optics to ethics, reminding donors and administrators that trust is not preserved by silence, but earned through responsibility. The vote that follows is not unanimous, but it is sufficient, funding secured with conditions that demand oversight and openness, conditions he accepts without hesitation. When the cameras ask why, he would risk everything. He answers that medicine taught him a simple rule: do not hide the problem if you want the patient to heal. Lydia learns of this not through a call from him, but through the hum of the city, the way news travels even to places it never meant to reach, and she listens with a steady heart, refusing to romanticize the timing. Days later, a letter arrives at her apartment, not couriered, not branded, just a simple envelope with careful handwriting. Inside is an apology written without defense, acknowledging the moment he chose strategy over her autonomy, naming the harm without minimizing it, stating clearly that he does not ask for forgiveness, only the chance to speak honestly if she ever allows it. Tucked beneath is a document she recognizes at once, the contract they signed, now voided and marked as such, along with a separate note transferring the escrowed funds to a community clinic fund in her mother's neighborhood, a gesture that returns value to where it was first borrowed. Lydia sits with the letter for a long time, not deciding, just noticing the absence of pressure, the respect embedded in restraint. When she finally agrees to meet him, it is on neutral ground, a small cafe near the hospital where conversations blend into background noise and no one looks twice. Julian arrives early and stands when she enters, nervousness visible, posture unguarded. He does not reach for her hand. He does not lead. He waits. He tells her what he did and why, not as a performance, but as an accounting, and when he finishes, he asks what she needs to say. Lydia speaks about trust as a practice, about how easily it fractures when power forgets consent, about the difference between protecting a mission and protecting oneself, and Julian listens without interruption, absorbing each word. When she says she will not return to pretending, he nods, relieved, and says he is done with pretending too. He offers nothing conditional, no plans, no timelines, only presence and patience. As they leave, he thanks her for teaching him something his titles never did, that leadership without integrity is theater, and theater does not save lives. Lydia walks home lighter, not because everything is resolved, but because the choice is hers again, unclaimed and intact. In the weeks that follow, they rebuild slowly, publicly distant and privately sincere, learning how to meet without contracts, how to choose without leverage, and when Julian finally asks if she would consider standing beside him again, not as a shield but as an equal, Lydia answers with a quiet yes that belongs entirely to her. Lydia chooses a Saturday morning for the conversation because it feels honest, sunlight slanting across the community clinic where she now volunteers on her days off, the hum of ordinary life grounding her as Julian waits by the window, hands relaxed, no agenda in his posture. They have learned each other slowly since the storm, meeting for coffee, walking familiar blocks, speaking when there is something to say, and resting when there is not. And today carries a quiet weight that does not need announcing. Julian tells her the program launched its first mobile unit this week, that oversight is rigorous and welcome, that the work feels cleaner now, and Lydia smiles because she recognizes the relief of alignment, when effort and values finally point the same way. She shares news too, that her mother is stable, that the clinic fund has expanded services, that she feels rooted again, and the exchange feels like two lives meeting without crossing lines. When Julian asks if they can step outside, she agrees, and they stand beneath a young maple planted with a plaque that reads for the neighborhood, a promise grown from patience. He does not kneel. He does not surprise. He speaks clearly, saying that he once asked her to pretend because fear taught him control, and that he learned the cost of that mistake in losing her trust. He says he is not asking for a performance or a shield or a schedule. He says he is asking for a partnership built on choice, for a future where consent is continuous and truth is not a strategy, but a habit. He asks if she would marry him, not because it solves anything, but because he wants to keep choosing her with no conditions. Lydia feels the moment settle, not like a spotlight, but like a deep breath after a long climb, and she answers yes with a steadiness that surprises her, because the word carries no fear. They keep the celebration small, a ceremony in the clinic courtyard weeks later, folding chairs borrowed, flowers donated, laughter rising without rehearsal, and when Lydia walks toward Julian. There is no script, only presence. Vows are simple, promises spoken in full sentences, about listening before acting, about protecting agency, about building together without erasing who they were alone. The contract that once defined them sits framed on a side table, voided and marked with a single line through it, a reminder of where they began and what they chose to leave behind. Afterward, they dance lightly, neighbors and colleagues mingling, and Lydia notices how Julian moves differently now, shoulders eased, eyes attentive, the man he is when nothing needs hiding. As evening falls, they slip away to a quiet corner, hands intertwined, watching the city glow beyond the trees, and Lydia thinks of the bus rides and the counting and the careful choices that led here. Julian thanks her for insisting on dignity, for refusing to be convenient, and she thanks him for learning, for changing publicly and privately. They leave together without hurry, carrying no conditions forward, only a shared understanding that love, like leadership, is proven by action, renewed daily, and chosen freely. And as they step into their life, it feels not like an ending, but like the first honest beginning they have ever known.